our next learning target is something called trigonometric ratios. In this video, I'm going to focus on sine and cosine because they kind of go hand in hand. Um, Sine is essentially the rise, and cosine is essentially the run, and then it's the ratio based on the hypotenuse. Um, Again, there's a Prezi that goes over multiple examples. If you click here, and then a couple calculator button things, you'll hit sine, cosine, tangent to find a missing side. And then you'll hit the second button and then sine -1, cosine -1, tangent -1 to find a missing angle. And then lastly, make sure you're not in radian mode. We're working with degrees here in a triangle. In a side, if I know a degree measurement and at least one side length, I can find all the information on a triangle. Make sure you're always in degree mode on your calculators. So sine and cosine ratios, they're again sort of inverses of each other, and they're very similar to rise and run. Sine is ultimately, if I'm at angle A, the rise or the opposite leg, A is on the right, the opposite leg is on the left. It's the ratio for a given angle measurement for an opposite leg and the hypotenuse. If I have like 20 degrees here, the leg divided by the hypotenuse, no matter how big or small the triangle is, that ratio is always going to be the same. And my calculator finds that for me if I know the angle. And then the adjacent side, and A is going to be in it. So like AC is the adjacent side. It's actually touching angle A. Cosine is going to work with the adjacent leg. So how this gets applied, and I'll hide myself so you see the diagram. One World Trade Center in New York City is 1776 feet tall. And if I know the angle of elevation is 10 degrees, 90 minus 10 gives me 80 degrees as the angle of depression. I can now figure out the hypotenuse. So that's why sine and cosine get used when tangent can't. There's two methods then. If I use the angle of elevation, I'm going to use sine because 10 degrees is on the right. The height of the building in the triangle is 1776 on the left. So I want to use sine, put the opposite over the hypotenuse. I don't know the hypotenuse. I'm going to do some algebra to figure that out in a second here. If I use 80 degrees, now the opposite is BH, and 1776 is the adjacent. So I'm going to put that adjacent number, 1776, over the hypotenuse. In both of these, I eventually want HT by itself. And very similar to tangent, HT initially is in the denominator. If something is in the denominator, the final answer is going to come from the division problem. If it's in the numerator, the variable, it's going to come from a multiplication problem. And you'll see more examples on that. So how do I cancel out multiplying by sine 10, which happens to be 0.174? That's telling us that for every 0.174 feet of height corresponds to 1 foot of distance on the hypotenuse. So I'm going to divide by both those, and then 1776 divided by that 0.174 gives me about 10,227.6 feet. So how that's going to show up in Khan Academy is two distinct different ways. You'll be asked basically just set up the trig ratio. If you're at B, what's the sine of it? Well, what's the opposite side length? B is on the top, I guess, and 12 is on the bottom. So it's 12, and then the hypotenuse is 13. By the way, if it asks for cosine on this particular problem, it would simply be 5 over 13. So the only two answers, if you understand hypotenuse is involved, the only two answers that make any sense at all are 5 over 13 and 12 over 13. Another sine problem. And again, what's opposite of it? B's on the right, 4 is on the left. So it's going to be 4 over 5. 3 over 5 would be the, down here, that would be cosine of it. And then the other thing that you'll end up seeing is simple triangles like this. So you need to identify what information do I have, 40 degrees. BC's opposite, 40 is on the bottom, BC's on the top. So 5 is the adjacent, and I want to find the hypotenuse. Adjacent hypotenuse, I'm going to go back and look at my notes or look at the Google slides. Adjacent and hypotenuse involves the ka part of SOHCAHTOA. You're going to do cosine, and I've got the work right here. So I want to grab my calculator. Again, radian mode, bad, degree mode, good. And I want to type in the 40. And I want to hit cosine. I need to go to the big screen for that. And we're going to run short on time here. And then I want to do 5 divided by that 0.766, which happens to be about 6.52. And I typed that in, but I got to the wrong tab.